My name is Federico,
I'm Haley.
and the study that we're presenting is the consumption of fermented milk product with probiotic modulates brain activity. So the researchers talked about how there's a growing amount of evidence that the gut microbiome regulates neurological functions, and these findings come from the findings that have happened in rodent studies, where they've seen that the gut microbiome and its composition are big factors for neurological development as well as emotional behavior. So they wanted to design a study that tested this in humans, and they hypothesized that the gut-to-brain signaling plays a big role in emotional behavior in response to an emotional attention task, was the way they tested this. And they also thought that alterations in the gut microbiome due to probiotics would cause differential responses to this task. So again, their objective was to explore whether regular probiotic consumption alters women's brain responses to emotional stimuli.
So this study was only done in women, and women were recruited through advertisements, and you had to be completely healthy and not already have some of the bacteria that was in these probiotics in your gut to be recruited for the study. You also had to be 18 to 35 years old. And so there were 3 groups of women that were recruited for the study. The intervention group received a fermented milk product with the probiotic, and there were 12 people in that group, and the control group received a milk product, but it was not fermented and it did not contain probiotics, but it basically was identical to the fermented milk product in every way except for the fact that it didn't have these probiotics. And this was to control for the placebo effect and the effect that dairy might have on the gut-brain axis. And then the last group was the no intervention group, which received nothing, neither the fermented milk product or the placebo product. And this was to look at the normal sort of states of resting brain analysis and sort of normal brain activity and changes over time. And so after these women were recruited, the FMPP group, which is the fermented milk product with probiotic, and the control group had to eat their products and or consume them twice a day for 4 weeks. And after that was over, they did a fMRI on the women while they were performing an emotional stimulus task with different sort of emotional faces. And the fMRI used BOLD analysis, which is blood oxygen dependent level dependent analysis, in order to see how the brain was reacted during the emotional task. And they used partial least squares analysis to determine if there's any correlation between consuming this probiotic and differences in the performance of the task.
So they found that a network of regions in the brain showed significant differential function pre and post intervention, and this network consisted of primary interoceptive and somatosensory regions, as well as a PAG region in the midbrain. And they found that there was an increased activity in this network over time, both in the non-intervention group, and then they found no changes in the control group, which was the non-fermented milk product group. And then they found decreased activity in this network in the FMPP group. They continued to do whole brain and region of interest analysis, which found FMPP associated BOLD changes in the insular and somatosensory cortices, which is denoted in figure 2. And they also found that there was significantly less BOLD activity among subjects in the FMPP group compared to the other groups. And when they compared the other 2 groups to each other, they found pretty similar levels of this activity. Okay, moving on. They also then seeded the group, this network, based on 3 key regions: the PAG, the insular regions, and the somatosensory cortex. And when they did this analysis, they found that the PAG seeded resting site network was responsible for 45.5% of the covariance about network activity. And this network consisted of the sensory region, limbic region, basal ganglia, and its attention-related regions. and although the other seeds, both the somatosensory and the insular seeds, didn't really show many differences in amongst themselves, but there were significant nodes within the PAG-based seeding, and yeah, that's about it.
So what you can conclude from these results is that in healthy adult women, regular consumption of a probiotic containing fermented milk product can alter the way that, especially a PAG, or whatever, I don't know how to say that, especially the way that a PAG-centered brain network responds to emotionally stimuli. And this network, by and large, is decreased by, or like the responsiveness of this network is decreased by consuming the fermented milk product. And so it's kind of hard from just all this data to be able to say, well, what does this mean, and what is this like, how does this have implications in the brain and on sort of physiological responses? And sort of what it means is that some of these regions, like the somatosensory cortex and viscerosensory cortex, that were decreased by probiotic consumption in women are responsible for creating like emotional responses and sensory responses. So probiotics were able to kind of lessen these responses, and it could have implications for things like pain management or stress management, anxiety, or like emotional distress. Any of the sort of responses that are brought on by those parts of the brain could be modulated by probiotics. And this study didn't prove that, but it did show that there was definitely like a connection between probiotics and modulation of the brain, and so it sort of laid the groundwork for further research. And it was the seminal paper in its field, so the very first one to be done on humans about how probiotics affect the gut-brain axis, and it's been cited by 153 other papers so far. Something to note is that all the study subjects were women, and so you can't really generalize it to any other groups, but it does, again, give you sort of questions to ask about moving forward, how this probiotic consumption and how the gut microbiome in general can affect like neurological responses. That's about it.